my degree is in math and organic chemistry, and so I think my mind is more visual, because geometry was my favorite topic.
It was favorite, and I never got to take geometry, and that was a mistake. You see, back then they got into a thing where if we can just get over this algebra block, we should have gone right to trig, and what should have been done with me is building model bridges, build them with different angles, calculate the trig functions on the angles, and then do fun destructive testing of them. And you just make them out of cardboard and string. And then you learn, though, that trigonometry in a really real way, because I've got a good sense for trig. I went years ago, 20 years ago or so, I went to the Kansas City Royal Livestock Show in Kansas City, and they just built a new convention center, and they had the show in there. And I looked up at the roof, and it was a big flat roof, and I looked up at that roof, and I looked at the way it was braced, and I go, this roof isn't safe. It's not going to take snow load. I can't tell you why I don't like this roof, but I don't think the braces are going to hold. It fell down a year later due to snow load.
So you could see it in your mind?
I could see it in my mind, and I just couldn't. Then I pictured putting like a wet snowstorm, big snow load. Fortunately, nobody was in the building when it collapsed. It happened at night, but I looked at that roof and I go, this isn't safe.
Have you seen that Howard Hughes movie, The Aviator?
I haven't seen that.
Okay. There's one part of the movie that I love where he's looking at blueprints of the airplanes, and he was just like seeing it. He could see in his mind where he needed to change the models and what to do.
But that's exactly what I can do with my cattle stuff. I can draw out a cattle handling facility, and I can imagine it all built. I can run cattle through it. I can imagine myself as the cattle going through it, as the person walking along the catwalk, moving the cattle, in a helicopter flying over it. I can imagine it all the different ways. And I've sat in conference rooms when we've been working on plant layout on some of my stockyard projects, and they'll say, well, let's try this. And then I'll like test run it, and I go, no, that isn't going to work. And they're almost like using me like a 3D CAD program. We're just talking in the conference room.
Let's plug it into the simulator. Now Temple.
That's basically what we were doing. We were plugging it into the simulator. And I said, now let me explain to you, and this is with good people that didn't you see, and one of the things I had very difficult time dealing with clients was the ego stuff. And projects got messed up due to ego. Projects got messed up because a resident employee at the plant got jealous because this nerd was coming in on his territory. I actually had some equipment sabotage problems. And that was difficult to deal with. I mean, I know another autistic draftsman where he was sabotaged at work because the other people were jealous. You know, and this can sometimes be a real problem, and the boss needs to protect this person against social problems that they just can't deal with. But you get in with a really good person that, you know, I was in with a bunch of guys that, you know, we all just love the design stuff. And they would they'd give me ideas, and I said, okay, I'm going to run them on the simulator. And then I explained to them why they wouldn't work. I said, now if you do it this way, you're going to pull out of the rails out of the ceiling. If you do that, let me just draw it out and show you why it's not going to work. But then let's look at some of the other, you know, jobs, you know, that are often overlooked. I think it's a real shame in high schools now that they've taken out the auto mechanics, the welding, the drafting, because these are some of the areas where these students could really excel. And one thing good about a course like auto mechanics is they're not going to fix cars over in China. That's something that's still got to be done here, and that's going to give somebody, you know, lifetime employment. And I'm not talking about doing oil changes. I'm talking about real serious car mechanics.
Yeah, we have a real problem, I believe, with the curriculum requirements for high school. They keep changing their minds on what they are, requiring so many classes that the kids don't have many choices to pick these extra activities.
Well, I don't think there's enough thinking about employment, because you take these people that have uneven skills, and this isn't limited just to the Asperger, but okay, and you're a science teacher. So you're going to have, you know, dyslexic kids in your class, ADHD kids, kids labeled with a diagnosis called conduct disorder, which I think is absolutely ridiculous. But the thing is that they're going to be kids with uneven skills. And you've got to take the thing that they're good at and build on it, and we need to be thinking about what can they where can their talents be used in employment? And I look at the people that are successful, you know, like a really good auto mechanic, and I ask them, well, how did you get into auto mechanics? Well, his dad was an auto mechanic and just pulled him into the field. You know, I'm asking, where are a lot of the programmers coming from? There's 2 routes they're coming in right now. They're coming in through the parents in the field pull the kids into it, and then I've talked to some technology companies, and they've told me that they're getting the programmers out of the military. I was a little bit surprised at that. Well, I thought, well, yeah, the military probably put some manners into them. I want them to get some programmers out of some other routes as well. This is just one more hint of this problem, you know, with the manners.
Wow.
I was really surprised at that, and that's something I just learned. I don't want this. Just learned in 2004 about getting programmers out of the military. I can't tell you which tech companies I talked to. I have to keep a little.
Yeah.
Got to keep a little confidentiality there.
No, but this is serious.
But I'm very serious. This is something that really concerns me, and that's something I learned in 2004. I was really kind of surprised at that, because then I go to an autism meeting, or I've been doing quite a lot of talks at gifted and talented meetings, and I'm seeing a lot of these same kind of Asperger kids showing up, but they're going down the right path. Parents tend to be in a tech field, and they're pulling the kids right on into the field.
See, I think that is one of the biggest problems I have right now is kids who believe they don't need to behave, be respectful, or even they can treat their peers terribly, and it's okay because they did something to them first, or this is a problem that I see.
Well, and then you get into the destructive behavior. I mean, I was taught very young, you don't destroy property. And now I did get in fights, but you know, when I had problems at work where people did something, I got very upset about it. In fact, I had to change anger to crying, because that then avoided fights, and it's probably easier for a girl. But the idea of damaging the office or the place where I'd had the problem, that just never crossed my mind, because it was drilled into me as a young child. You know, like, you don't throw away good stuff. Like our old clothes, we'd put them in the Salvation Army box so somebody else could use them. You don't destroy property. These were things that were drilled into me as a little kid. You know, you don't waste things. That's still a good thing that somebody else could use. I mean, these were very basic values. And it just seems like every month I'm just learning more and more about how important some of these childhood values that were drilled into me were.
Yes. Do you have any questions? Because we're the tape. We only have a little time left on the tape. Is there
Okay.
anything
Just one other thing I want to mention. You know, my mother's been doing a lot of talks now, and she presents a whole, you know, different side of the story on emotion. Now, my mother's, in her book, she describes a real difficult marriage, and I never realized the turmoil was going on, because they weren't screaming, they weren't throwing pots and pans, and they were not hitting. Now, again, this gets back to their upbringing. They were not, you know, busting down the house and hitting each other. So it was subtle, their friction. I never picked up on it. My sister picked up on it, but I didn't pick up on it, because it was subtle emotional turmoil. That might be just one added thing. See, and I think...
So parents' behavior is so significant.
But the behavior that was significant to me was teaching me that when we went out to Granny's for a fancy Sunday dinner, I was expected to behave and to eat with manners, and most of the time I did. And that training was very valuable for me. And I was to be careful with their stuff and not damage things in Granny's house. Even as a young child, I used to tear up my own room, tear up the living room. Living room damage was off limits.